Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey, do you want to help the oceans? Have you considered a career in marine biology, but maybe just aren't sure where to start? Head on over to my website, marinebio.life, and subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free PDF download where you'll learn the 7 steps to becoming a marine biologist without the degree. Hello, mermaids, pirates, ocean lovers, and land lubbers. Welcome to today's show. Question: did you hear about the pinniped that became friends with a polar bear? His fate was sealed. Are penguins and puffins similar? No, they're polar opposites. Polyglot and multiple degree holder Constance Schéré joins us on the podcast today. What are these multiple degrees, you ask? She has an undergrad, 2 master's degrees, and she's currently working on her PhD. In this super wide-ranging episode, we chat about how Constance went from a degree in history to studying marine science and then marine conservation, how growing up next to a marine protected area influences her work now, and how she's brought it full circle. We also chat about the differences between French, English, and American university systems. Constance has experienced all 3, and when a university will actually kick you out. Constance recently co-authored a publication with British Ecological Society about 30 by 30, and she shares just what that means and how we're looking. Constance shares 3 pretty amazing field stories at the end of the episode, so be sure to stay tuned for that. Please enjoy. Constance, welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Hi, I'm really excited as well. I've been really looking forward to this.
So we're going to start at the beginning. You grew up on the coast of France. What was that like?
I kind of grew up in a number of places, but my hometown, my home is in northern Brittany, on the coast. So it's on the English Channel side, and or what we call La Manche, because we're not English. Yeah, I grew up there. I was fortunate enough to grow up really in front of a massive marine protected area, or MPA. I'm talking about MPAs, so just get that acronym out of there. I grew up going out fishing and spending time on my dad's boat, and we like swimming and doing cliff diving and all these activities that you would do when you grow up by the ocean, but also really being sensitive to the fact that like this is an amazing resource.
Yeah, that's really cool. So is that kind of what inspired you to head into a career of science, like playing in the ocean growing up?
Actually, my first degree is in history. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't realize until my last year at uni that you could actually go into conservation, like that was a thing. This was in the early 2010s ish, like late. Yeah. So, I knew about Jacques Cousteau and all that, but, I only realized it way too late. So I couldn't change my major at that time. I had taken enough science classes, but I wasn't able to change. So I was able to then get into a master's program, in environmental policy at Sciences Po in Paris, which you needed a scientific background for. So thank God I had taken enough science classes at that time to be able to qualify for that program. But yeah, it wasn't until my last year of uni that I realized that this was something that I could do. I was interested already, but I didn't realize it was like a job that you could have working in conservation. As far as I was concerned, conservation was just NGOs and like Greenpeace type of like actions, not so much doing like scientific research around it. Yeah,
that makes total sense. Yeah, it's something that gets highlighted more and more for sure, but a lot of people still don't understand that it doesn't have to, like, the science helps support the conservation rather, right? Like if we don't have the science backing it up, it's just it just lends a lot more weight behind it. So it's awesome. So why history then? Were you a huge history buff growing up?
Yeah, I was, and I still am. I still read like historical fiction or even biographies and all that. But I guess I wanted to be a teacher at first, and I really liked history. And my dad's a professor. Well, was a professor. He's retired now in economics. And so I thought, well, that sounds good. I will become a history teacher, and that's why I went into history. And then because I did my undergrad in the United States at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, which is completely different from the French and British system. There was I can't remember, were they called like general education requirements or some? Yes. Basically, that's why there's there was there's an extra year at uni, and I just took a bunch of science classes, and so. So like I said, I was not until the last year where I realized, oh, I think I messed up here. It was too late. But fortunately, I had half a degree's worth of science credits, and that helped, get me out. Actually, I plan on finishing a degree in biology at some point when I finish my PhD, just to have it under my belt. It sounds a bit like overkill, but it is something I'm passionate about doing.
Wait, you were going to get your PhD in history and then get a bio degree?
No, sorry.
Oh, really. Okay. I'm like, that's really zealous. Like,
no, I'm doing my PhD right now.
Right.
Okay. I'm doing my PhD in marine science right now. But once I finish my PhD, I would very much like to, see that all those science credits through. And I still have, I think, a year out of a bachelor's degree in biology. So I'm going to do that after when I'm done with my PhD. Just for the crack. Yeah, for the crack.
That's amazing. So actually, could you go back and explain a little bit of the difference between like the French and the American schooling system, at least at the university level?
Yeah, so I did both my master's degrees in France, so it's obviously different. But the undergrad in France is 3 years compared to the United States is 4 years, and there are no general education requirements, or gen eds, I think you said. You basically go in knowing what your major is, and obviously that will decide what university you go to, because some of the universities are specialized in the arts and some of them in the humanities, and others would be in like the sciences or engineering. And so that's why it's only 3 years. You don't learn around your subject, you just learn what you're there for. So obviously it makes it more difficult to like transfer out, or you just need to know you need to know in France 2 years before you finish high school what pathway you're taking. So when you're 16, you decide, are you doing L, which is literary, ES, which is economic and social sciences, or S, which is sciences. And so from that trajectory will tell you if you're going to do a bachelor's degree in mathematics or in biology, or one in history, or one in literature. So yeah, it's it doesn't have the kind of freedom I think that the American system has at that level, where you can show up not really having declared a major in the United States, and then kind of figure it out through all those general education requirement classes. Some people know what they want to do. Some people change majors. Some people get minors. Those things don't apply in traditional French university system. So
interesting. So that's really funny. It just seems like a lot of, like, coming from the American system, I'm like, that seems like a lot of pressure on a 16-year-old, like, figure out what you want to do right now, like, holy bananas. But so for me, I knew I wanted to go straight into marine biology, and those gen ed classes drove me bananas. I'm like, I don't want to learn about classical theory of music. I don't care. So yeah, I see both sides of the coin. I do. That's interesting though.
Yeah, and well, there is one thing that I think is interesting about the French and the British system is that you don't need to go to uni. And so you can leave school at 16 and then go into like a professional or technical schooling. And a lot of people do that because not everyone's destined for uni, and or doesn't, they can go later on. They don't need to do the baccalaureate or your A levels. So it's a bit different. At 16, you could technically just leave school and go and get a job or an apprenticeship and then do that for the rest of your life. It's a bit different.
Or get a job and an apprenticeship and then decide later you want to go to uni and go back.
Yeah.
I like that. Okay. Very cool. But you knew you wanted to go to why in the US?
My dad was teaching over there. He was a professor at Tufts University.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I was originally planning on going either back to France or to Canada for uni, but then for some health issues, I had to stay close by in
Mhm.
Massachusetts. So I stayed there, and I went to UMass, and no, it was great. I got the like full American experience of uni, which is so much different from like where I'm, because now I'm in a British system, and before that I was in the French system. So yeah, I got to try a little bit of everything, which is nice.
Yeah. Okay. So I like really want to get into the MPAs in your work, but this like difference between all of the country systems is like really interesting to me. So could you explain some of the differences that you've observed between like the French English and American systems?
Yeah, so I was actually just chatting to one of my friends who's she's doing her PhD in France, so I'm doing it in the
Okay.
UK. At that point, so it's already different. And
Mhm.
comparing that with my friends who are doing their PhDs in the United States.
Mhm.
So we were talking about the quals. I think that's what they're called. We don't have those. For
Okay.
example, we have to finish in a set of years. So like for my PhD, I
Oh.
have 4 years full time. That's it. After 4 years, I have to
Oh.
submit, and that's it. You're not
What
kicked out.
happens? You
You're,
kicked out?
I didn't want to say you're kicked out, but you're kicked out. Yeah. um,
Okay.
so
Get it
if
done or get out.
yeah, if you do, I mean, if you have extenuating circumstances, of course you can interrupt, and but the point is you have to submit by by the time it's a set time. It's not like you can do your PhD in 5 years or anything like that. And when you
Yeah.
start a PhD in the UK and in France, you have a master's degree already. Like you don't, it's not a build on.
Mhm.
So that narrows it down, and you don't have to take additional courses or anything like that. There's no exams to pass. The only thing you have is what we call in the UK an upgrade, which is like a mini viva. So after the first 18 months of your when you're of the start of your PhD, I'm saying this in full time, obviously, not for part time. You just double it. But then you pass your upgrade, which is basically you have to show all the work you've done in the last 18 months.
Mhm.
Have like at least an introduction chapter, a lit review chapter. If you've been fortunate enough to publish a chapter, include that, and then you pass a viva, like an oral viva with an external examiner that's within the
Okay.
department. So they're not external to the uni, but they're external to you, as in they're not your supervisors. And
Right.
we have two
That makes sense.
supervisors. Some people have more, but it's usually two supervisors at least. Um, so where I understand from the American system, it's completely different. It's a much longer process. My
Mhm.
dad did his PhD in the United States, but again, he did it in econ, so it's a bit different. Was it
Yeah.
econ? I actually don't even remember. It might have been business management, one of those things. But yeah, his was obviously in the 70s, so I think it's probably different now as well. But yeah, so it's just interesting hearing about the different types of hoops that we have to jump through as PhDs. And I don't have any experience doing a master's in the United States at all, so I
Mhm.
can't comment on that at all.
Yeah.
Both of my masters have been in France, and I did a postgraduate diploma in Scotland. So that's pretty much the master's degree without the dissertation, because I haven't gotten around to that. So
Okay, so you're gonna go back and get around to that when you go back and get your bachelor's in biology. So just gonna
yeah,
fill in those
yeah, I'm doing
gaps.
it. I'm doing it backwards, kind of. I'm somebody who really enjoys learning, and I think what's really great nowadays is that you can do all these things online. With
Mhm.
some residential schooling, so having to go to a lab for a week or something like that. But a lot of it can be done online and part time, so working around your schedule. So like the bachelor's degree is with the Open University. So I know that
Mhm.
you had somebody was she from Jersey who was on talking about the OU, and the OU is
Right.
really popular in the UK. And so that basically it's designed for people who work full time to be able to follow a degree
Yeah.
part time. So having that, I think, is really great for anybody. Like my dad's talking about going to law school at 75, just again for the crack, like just for fun, because that's something he's always wanted to do. And now you can do that, because you can do that from your own home. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. So it's a learning family. You guys just really enjoy it. That's so cool.
Yeah, now I feel like people are going to start judging and be like, she's insane.
No, whatever. You enjoy it. You're enjoying it. That's the thing of it, right? Like as long as you're having fun, you know, every different strokes for different folks. Okay, so did you know like you found out partway through your bachelor's that like you could have this career in conservation? So like that's when you were like, I'm definitely getting my master's. Did you know then you were going to get your PhD too?
So it's funny because I actually found like one of those Facebook memories that said when I finished my first master's, I was like, I'm done with school. Little did I know, sweet summer child. No, so so at first as soon as I finished my first master's, I went straight to work for a company called Dassault Systems. It's a French company, software company. I was working there in their sustainable innovation lab, doing a lot of like environmental sustainability kind of things, and carbon audits and whatnot. And then I spent a few years in industry, and I realized it really wasn't for me. So I just a lot of greenwashing, a lot of marketing, and stuff that I just didn't really understand very well because I wasn't trained or for corporate life. And then I was in the United States at the time, and I actually had started doing a biology degree at Harvard Extension. Because I wanted to go back to school. I was like, no, this is not enough for me. I need more. And I wanted to do a PhD, but I needed more experience. So at that time, for family reasons, personal reasons, I decided I needed to move back to France, and it was way more interesting price wise, for schooling. So I had applied to a bunch of universities for PhDs, and I didn't get in, and that happens. So I rethought, like, what am I trying to achieve here with the PhD? At first, I was kind of dabbling in environmental health, and then I really honed in on the conservation again. It kind of came back in a push. I don't know how to explain. But yeah, so then I moved back to France, and then I was fortunate enough to get into this program at the Institute of Geography from the Sorbonne. And that's where I was like, right, now I'm going to reapply for PhDs now that I have, these 2 masters, work experience under my belt, all this, and I have a clear idea of what I want to study, which was marine protected areas. I'd already started being interested in the marine environment when I was doing my first master's, but I was more interested in like what we call green tides, like eutrophication and the health impacts of that. And then I started realizing that there was all this pollution happening within protected areas. And that's when it kind of clicked. And I was like, no, I should be doing the conservation stuff. That's way more interesting than the environmental health. For me, it was more interesting. And that's where my master's thesis for my second master's basically created a blueprint for my PhD. So what I'm working on now. So, which is marine protected area effectiveness in the Irish Sea. So I'm using the Irish Sea as a case study.
Yeah. I saw that you kind of like your master's is kind of like a jump off point in your PhD. And I want to come back to that. But something that you brought up just now that it makes sense in my head, but like you just put a really fine point on it, was you were looking at the science side, like analyzing the problem versus like studying like the green tides that you're saying versus looking at like the conservation side and like actually, what is it? What do they say? Like pollution is kind of like you got to turn the faucet off instead of like cleaning it, like trying to like deal with an overflowing bathtub. So for me, that's kind of what your jump off point looked like, was like, instead of trying to like clean up this overflowing bathtub, like analyzing all the things that are wrong, I want to like turn the faucet off. I want to look at the conservation side and see how we can even prevent this from happening. So I just like, I don't know, for some reason that like really clicked in my head when you said it like that.
Yeah. And I think that that's probably what, now that you say it, I'm thinking, well, that makes sense. So, maybe I didn't realize it at the time. But what I had been realizing was when I was looking into these green tides, and for those who don't know what a green tide is, it basically, so this is an issue that is worldwide, but we have in Brittany because of slurry and like runoff. So fertilizer, because there's a lot of pig farming going on. And so that seeps into waterways, and then that ends up in our ocean systems. And those are packed with nutrients. And so an algae love nutrients, plants love nutrients, and they thrive on that. And so the more plants you have, the more algae you have, the more that can create a state of hypoxia or anoxia. So no oxygen gets in. So it creates these mats at the top on top of the water. And so then that damages ecosystems underneath. So it basically suffocates anything that's living underwater. So it's just, if you could imagine, just a big blanket of algae that's kind of just suffocating everything that's underneath. But also these release like hydrogen sulfide, and that is toxic to humans, and there has been and other animals. I think what made the news in Brittany was wild boar that were dying, that were found dead on the beach, from basically asphyxiation from these noxious gases. And a horse passed out, and I think a man ended up in hospital. So, and so as I was looking into this, I realized, but the problem's upriver. So why are we allowing this to happen? And what is the management that comes into play here to, as you said, turn the faucet off, so that we don't have all this fertilizer seeping into our water systems and then creating these green tide. So we call it green tide because it's the ulva species that's green algae, but then you also have red tides. It really depends on where you are in the world. But the more that happens, then we have what was called dead zones, and then there's nothing viable in those areas. So
yeah, we have there's red tides really prevalent on the west coast of Florida. So, and every now and again they trickle around, they'll catch the current and come up on the east coast. But usually they're a natural phenomenon. It happens naturally in the west coast of Florida, except it's just been going gangbusters the last several years because of eutrophication, right? There's all these extra nutrient loads, and like it's just been built up over time. So now these like red tides that used to just be like a whimsical occurrence, right, are like a huge problem. So it's a similar thing, and this isn't caused by an algae, it's caused by a dinoflagellate, but similar phenomenon. Okay, so I'm curious, like, growing up on an MPA, is that like, did you know what it was, a protected area growing up? And is that kind of what like shifted you into your current studies now?
Yeah. So fortunately for us, the marine protected area is known as, so I'm going to say it in French and then I will translate it. So its official title is La Réserve Naturelle Nationale des Sept Îles. So that means the National Nature Reserve of the Seven Islands. But it's not actually seven islands, because it's a mistranslation from Breton, which is the indigenous language in Brittany, where I'm from, so in northern France. But so it's an offshore MPA. It's about 4 or 5 nautical miles offshore. So it's not offshore in the sense that it's very far. You can actually see it from the coast, but you can't
off
walk
of the shore. It is not connected.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you think offshore MPA, you're thinking more than 12 nautical miles, and you're thinking, but this is an offshore MPA, and because the name reserve is actually in its title and its designation, there's some connotation of protection, and it's very, very well known for its seabird populations. So it actually it is one of the main nesting sites for northern gannets within in France. It is one of the main reproductive sites for grey seals. We have a puffin colony, shearwaters. What else? What else do we have? What are they called? Razorbills in English. Okay. And so there's loads of them, but the main one was the puffin, and so it was designated in 1912. So it's really, really old. It's one of the first protected areas, I guess, in France in that sense. When I say the first, now there was some before, but this is one of the big ones. And the reason,
Among the first.
Yeah, among the first. Thank you. One of the reasons was because it used to be an attraction. You would go there to hunt puffins, and so there was a whole tourism industry built around like hunting these puffins, who came to nest on these islands, and so obviously that's actually how the LPO, which is the League for the Protection of Birds, and that's how they got their start. They're basically like the RSPB. I don't know what the American equivalent is, but it's like the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds,
Okay.
BirdLife International, that kind of.
Okay.
So
we have the Audubon Society here. That's
yes,
probably
yeah.
Okay.
They got their start protecting the puffins there, so it's really well known. And I've been fortunate enough to not only grow up in front of it, but have access to it because we take the boat out, and then I just did an internship last summer working on that reserve, which is actually prohibited to humans. So except for one of the islands, the other ones are only accessible for scientific research and monitoring.
Okay, so hang on, I want to back up. So you said that they used to take people out and like do tourist hunting on these islands, and did they just kind of like decimate the puffin populations, and that's why it became a reserve? Okay, yeah. Cool.
And even
so
now,
then, not cool, but so then you came full circle, and that's the cool part. Like
yeah,
to go back. You just had your internship there last.
Yeah,
summer?
That was last summer. I'm actually heading back to the reserve next week. No, this week. I'm heading back to France this week, and but yeah, going to keep working and supporting the LPO in their monitoring and all that on the reserve. Mm-hmm. So yeah, very full circle.
That's so cool. I love that. It's something that I've been like really thinking about a lot lately, that like it's like what you do locally that really, really matters, right? And I love that like you're focusing on, you have your spot in the Irish Sea that you're really studying, and that's kind of like a hyper local thing too. But like for you to bring it back full circle to like hometown marine reserve, that's really cool.
Yeah, and like I don't know if internships are very popular in American PhDs, but they're quite like we have what's called a doctoral training partnership, and they basically fund us. It's UK Research and Innovation, and so they'll fund our internship if we want to do that, or an overseas institutional visit or something like that. So that's why I was actually working in their they have like a bird hospital, and I was volunteering there for the reserve. And then I found out about this internship scheme, and I was like, hey, I'm from here and I'm working on MPAs. Hire me, please.
This seems like a great fit.
But it is. I think that's, I guess, the takeaway is a lot of people talk about, how can I get into marine conservation, marine science, and all that. And, I've heard you talk about it. Volunteering is just, it's a great door opener for opportunities. Yeah,
it really is. And then, I don't know, then you get to see what's going on, like behind the scenes, and then you just learn so much, but just by like taking that one little step. I love it. All right. Why 2 master's degrees? We're going to take a total left turn.
Yeah, no, that's fine. The reason was because my first master's degree was more geared towards like policy and it's an actually interdisciplinary degree, but it was much more geared towards policy and law, which I am terrible at.
Did you find that out during your master's?
Yeah, unfortunately. And
I
don't know why I decided to go that route. No, actually I do know why. My dad really wanted me to go into politics, basically. And so I said, okay, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Or I did, but it was like too late. And I actually started my first master's doing public affairs with a concentration in environment. And then I realized that the university actually offered, it was brand new program. I think it had been running for a year or two when I got there, in environmental policy. And so and because I was fortunate enough to have all these credits in sciences, they allowed me to transfer into that program, which I don't think I would have gotten into otherwise. So the reason I did my second master's was because that one was really geared on biodiversity and conservation and management. So that I think that was definitely necessary to move into that sphere of conservation that I didn't have so much in the first master's, which was a lot about, how do we shape public policy to address, climate change and other like eutrophication issues and that. So yeah, so that's why I did a second master's. Fortunately for me, I didn't have to do 2 years. I only had to do 1 year, because in France a master's is 2 years. Yeah, so there's another difference. Master's in France is 2 years. But if you already have a master's, then you can get then you don't need to do the first year over. You can get a speciality in 1 year. So so that was good. I didn't have to restart from the beginning. Yeah, if it's close enough, obviously, because if you're trying to do something completely left, out of the field, it wouldn't be the same. But yeah, that's another difference. In the United States and the UK, it's 1 year master's, if I'm not mistaken. It's 2 years. Okay, so in the UK, it's 1 year. So yeah, it's a bit weird how the programs are. I think you end up with the same number of years in the end, but yeah, from bachelor's to master's.
Okay.
Like in France, it's 2. In the UK, it's 3 years plus 1 year master's, so that's plus 4 after age 18, and then in France, it's 3 years plus 2, so that's 5 years.
Yeah. Well, in the US, it's 6 if you wanted to get your master's.
I didn't realize that. So
yeah. And like sometimes you can there's some programs that will let you lump your master's and your PhD if you want to do that. But I have not heard of anything where you can like lump your or your master's and your bachelor's. So very interesting learning all the differences here. I'm enjoying this. So I really want to go back, like you were like, oh, it's too late for me to pursue the conservation degree I want. And then you got into this master's that you're like, this is not for me. So it's really a myth, this myth of too late. Like you're going back and got your degree, your master's and the degree that you wanted. You're getting your PhD in that as well. And like your dad is going back contemplating law school at 75. Like it's a myth. Too late is just a myth.
My mom got her PhD at 50.
Who did?
55. My mom.
That's amazing.
Yeah. My mom, my sister and I were old enough, and she was like, I've been wanting, she actually started her first, she had tried to do a PhD. No, she started a PhD, but then got pregnant with my sister. And then that was it. It was the 70s. So, she decided that she was just, it was just too much. So, and it was, and it's still, I think I've got, colleagues who have children doing their PhD. It's a lot, so she'd always wanted to do her PhD. And so when my sisters and I were old enough, she decided, well, now's the time. I don't have to have childcare anymore. They're basically teenagers now. So, so she went back and got her PhD in something completely different from her original plan. She was in law school. But by the time she was back from maternity, I guess her topic was no longer relevant because laws change and all that. So, it's a question of timing a lot when it comes to your PhD, to make sure that it's still relevant 4 years later.
Right. Right. That makes sense. But I love it. It's a myth. The too late is just a myth. Like, and like another way to look at that, right, is like, okay, even if you have to start all the way over and like get a different bachelor's, like, so what if that means like you're not stuck in a job that you hate, or conversely, like you get a job that you really enjoy and that you love, and you're doing something you're passionate about and you're learning things that you like, then that's worth it, right? Otherwise you're just stuck doing something that you're like meh, or that you hate, worst case scenario, right? Hey, Kara here. I hear it all the time. How do I become a marine biologist? Or my niece wants to help the ocean. Where does she even start? I hear from students, yes, and also nurses, HR professionals, and other mid-career folks who wonder if they could still make their dream of working with sea turtles or sharks come true, wondering if it's too late to answer the ocean's call. Here's what I've learned after 20 years in the field and hundreds of interviews. There's no straight line, no magic degree, and no gatekeeper. You create the path forward. If this sounds overwhelming and vague, I've created 2 tools to help you stop wondering what if and start moving forward with clarity and purpose. The first is my free guide, Be a Marine Biologist Without the Degree. Over 1,000 people have already downloaded this guide and taken their first step towards ocean impact. Inside, you'll find 7 concrete, doable actions to help you get started, whether you're just exploring or ready to make a change. Then there's the Ocean Blueprint. This is a 30-day self-paced course that helps you build your unique path into ocean science and conservation without quitting your job or going back to school. Inside the Ocean Blueprint, you'll get daily prompts to explore your interests, skills, and next steps, a structure that turns overwhelm into real momentum, and a bonus section to root your work into ocean connection. You don't have to wait for a degree, a perfect plan, or permission. Whether you're wading in or ready to take the deep dive, these tools are here to help you move from dreaming to doing. The ocean called. Are you ready to answer? Links in the show notes and on my website, karagracemuzia.com. I can't wait to see the waves you'll make.
I think that the lockdowns, like the pandemic, I've noticed a shift in a lot of my friends who either already have a degree and then decided during lockdown that they just weren't happy in their jobs and decided they want to do something else, whether that be nursing or biotech or something that they were actually interested in.
Right.
And I think that because during the pandemic a lot of schooling was online. Yeah. It made it a bit more accessible to people. And, you could, like I said, go back to school while you're still working full time, while you're it's a lot of work, of course, right. But there's no, if you put in the hours and you're passionate about it, I think it beats being in a job that you're not passionate about.
Yeah. It's like is the juice worth the squeeze, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. I love it. Okay, so let's chat MPAs. Why the Irish Sea?
So originally, I wanted to, look at my backyard in the sense of the English Channel. Okay. But the English Channel is very studied. There's loads of papers, a lot of research going on there. And my partner is he's from Northern Ireland, and I was spending time up here, and I was realizing, I'm not finding a lot of literature on this particular area, and it's really
groundbreaking.
Well, it's interesting sea because it's under the jurisdiction of like 6 different countries. So you've got
the Irish Sea.
Yeah. So you've got well, when I say countries, it's the term like nation because the UK is made up of 4 right. nations, and then there's crown dependencies and all that. But so you've got so Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, and the Isle of Man.
Okay.
So which is a crown dependency, which is so not part of the UK, but also not part of the UK.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's
for some reason I just lumped the Isle of Man with that, but okay. It's
it's like Guernsey and Jersey that are crown dependencies, okay. And so they're kind of they weren't part of the EU either. Okay. So but people who live there are British. It's very confusing. And I spent time in Guernsey when I was younger. So we had a house there. So
politics.
But I still don't.
We'll just chalk it up to politics.
Still don't understand it. But now it's an interesting shift because of Brexit. Now you have the Irish Sea that is effectively the border between Britain and the EU, because Northern Ireland is still part of the single market. So the border is in the Irish Sea. Okay. And now the Irish Sea also functions as a border between the EU, so the Republic of Ireland, and the UK. So hitting in Northern Ireland. So it's a very politically charged area, and has become more so in the last few years. But why I was really interested in it is because it's there's just a lot of activity. There's a lot of shipping going on between the islands of Britain and Ireland, and so because that's where it's located, the Irish Sea separates Ireland from Britain, the 2 islands that make up the British Isles. which I think we should probably rethink the name. So there's a lot of people who depend on the Irish Sea for to get goods, for fishing, for offshore wind and all these. There's a lot of activity going on. So I thought, well, what impact does that have on our on the biodiversity there? And I started looking into the types of marine protected areas that were located within the Irish Sea limits, and that prompted me to ask, well, how effective are these MPAs at meeting their biological conservation objectives? And to give a little bit of background about marine protected areas for those who don't know or who don't remember, so a marine protected area is it's a protected area that has been designated for the protection of marine species, habitats. You have them on land as well. They're just called protected areas, right. But we have the marine ones, and they include coastal and offshore. So a lot of people can live on a marine protected area without actually realizing it, because it's part of because it does go up into the intertidal sometimes to the limits. Contrary to a terrestrial protected area, where you could actually fence it if you really wanted to. You can't really fence marine protected areas. So it's a bit difficult to know where it begins. And depending on when, on the tides, it's hard to, it's just shifting all the time. But so that makes it difficult to signpost and make sure people understand that those areas are actually protected. And because a lot of what is being protected is not visible with the naked eye because it occurs below sea level, it's also, it's kind of like an invisible protected area in some cases. And so in order for a protected area, whether it be terrestrial or marine, to be effective, it needs to basically deliver for nature in the long term, build ecological resilience, and be effectively managed and monitored, and then obviously be equitable as well, so that it doesn't encroach on the livelihoods of people who are directly, within its vicinity or who rely on that area for their livelihoods. So you're looking at, for marine protected areas, one of the big ones would be obviously fishing, some recreational activities, but also your offshore, wind farms and energy industries as well. So trying to find that balance.
Any sort of like human disruption of the natural world, right? Is what kind of what they guard against. And there's different levels, right? So like some are just like, no touchy, you don't like, some don't even let boats in. And then there's, on up. I don't even know what like the loosest standard, I guess. It seems like the wrong term.
I think it's like, partially, or there's like partially protected, I think. Minimally protected would be, so it goes from minimally protected all the way to fully protected, and then depending on the type of designation, it could be, like you said, no boats allowed, no extractive uses whatsoever, all the way to you can actually dredge in this area, which
so for me, I'm like, how is it even protected if you can dredge? But anyway, okay.
You're technically not supposed to, but unfortunately, and that comes back to this issue of management and monitoring. So it's one thing to say, right, I'm protecting this area, but then you put, it goes through the legal channels and says, right, now this area is on paper protected, but then there's no actual management, monitoring, or enforcement of the restrictions in place. So what you have is what we in the conservation world call a paper park. So it exists on paper, but it's not actually doing its job whatsoever. And so that's what I was kind of looking at through the beginning of my PhD, was looking at how much of the Irish Sea is made up of paper parks, and whether or not designating, if they have multiple designations, because there are designations at multiple levels. So that could be like your local one. So like your marine conservation zones in the UK, and then your Natura 2000 sites, which are, European legislation, and then your Ramsar wetlands, which are international. So depending on how many of these legal agreements there are, does that mean that we have better protection? And my research found that, there's a a weak positive correlation between the number of pieces of paper you've signed, basically, and the fact that there might be more funding and management happening in those areas because they're more visible. So they're more popular because they have
they have all of these different organizations agreeing and signing all the papers that they'll help protect it, or that it should be protected anyway.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So in the Irish Sea, like how much of it is like truly protected? Did your research kind of like look into that? Or like, you said you look into it, like how much of these actually like paper parks versus protected. So did you find that answer?
So there actually aren't any what we call there are not in the Irish Sea, but there are in the UK. But in the Irish Sea, there are no like no take zones. Mm-hmm. So what we would call like your reserve. So a marine reserve really means like you're not allowed to fish or do anything there. We don't have any of those. And we have like no take areas that might be located within a protected area. Mm-hmm. So for example, at Strangford Lough, which is in Northern Ireland, it had a really important modiolus, so horse mussel reef, and so those got decimated, and so they're trying to rebuild them now, to restore them. So those areas are no go zones where those reefs are, but the rest of the loch, even though it's a protected area, you can go to. So it's kind of like a no go zone and a no take zone in the middle of an area that's got a lesser protection. Okay. And so it's a bit confusing, especially trying to know where exactly it is. And unfortunately, a lot of people might go and take their boat out or kayak or jet ski or whatever and not realize that they are in a protected area because the name isn't there. It's, you just call it the place that it is. It's not like the national reserve of, and that creates a lot of problems. Not mostly because people aren't aware that there are restrictions. So like a lot of people might be doing things that are technically illegal, but they don't realize it because they don't realize that this is a protected area, and that's a problem with awareness and communication from marine protected area managers or the governments to make sure people are aware of what's in their own backyard.
That's really interesting. So I read part of, I don't know if it's your master's or your PhD, but something that really stuck out to me was that stakeholders, that you found that stakeholders just had no idea that they were stakeholders, that they had a say. So a stakeholder is anybody that like finds value basically in these waters. So whether they like use them for recreation or fishing or whatever it is, like if you go out into your local park or beach, you're a stakeholder. Like that's the moral of the story. And so that you're finding that people just think that they have no say in it. Could you talk a little bit about that?
So that was so that's the second empirical chapter of my PhD, okay. And I was looking at equity in marine protected areas because so a little bit of background before I explain what we're talking about. So the Aichi targets of the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, the target 11 was calling for effective and equitable management of protected areas. And we talk a lot about effectiveness in terms of, the natural world and biophysical features. But we don't really talk about the human dimension, the equity. And so my research was part of a larger program looking at protected areas around the world, terrestrial and marine, and looking at the level of equitable governance and management. And so through that program, that was with the International Institute for Environment and Development. And so I took 3 sites in the Irish Sea, and I had surveys and semi-structured interviews with stakeholders, and realized that, a lot of them didn't realize that, like I said, they were living on an MPA. They didn't understand what the rules and regulations, or they just weren't aware. No, sorry, it's not that they can't understand. They just didn't know what they can and cannot do. And I also realized that when, where people are aware that there is an MPA, their opportunities to participate in any decision making or consultations are very limited, and are more of a tick boxing exercise than actually including local people, local communities in any decision making that's being made. So there's a lack of transparency there about why management decisions are being made, and how people can get, like, why people can't get involved in those decisions, because especially for local aquaculturists, local fishers, people whose livelihoods depend on that, that coastal area. So that could be, a dive center or something like that. Any kind of restrictions put in place are going to directly affect their livelihoods. And so they need to be part of that conversation. And those stakeholders generally want to see a healthy area. They're not there to exploit it, because then there's nothing for them. Their livelihoods is over if they can't take in some of the ecosystem services that are provided by that area. So you want like that balance. And unfortunately, they're not involved in a lot of the decision making that's happening. So there's very low equity, I guess, was the conclusion of that paper.
Okay. Yeah. And it just like, it's so important to get involved. Like I talk about it. I know I talk about it. It just is like, just to know what's going on in your community. And like, I realized like kind of what you said, the delivery methods of education, right? Just like actually trying to include people were lackluster. But sometimes that's like, it takes like that one person to like seek out the information to broadcast it, because it just takes a little bit of, I don't know, like a little bit of initiative, I guess, on like your part. If you live in an area that you care about and like you want, what's going on, what is going on in the area that you care about, and are there things that are going on behind the scenes that you can help bring to light to people that like are influenced by it. Because we do live in an age where things, whether it's intentional or not, things happen where people are just kind of like swept by the wayside and then are just along for the ride because we are all in it together. And
there's also like, there's been a lot of research recently in the last few years about what this lack of equity does for conservation. And people are less likely to respect, restrictions and follow the rules if they feel like they've been excluded from decision making. So that's also part of it, is if you really want to protect our oceans, protect our environment, you need to have open conversations with the people who are directly affected by any by conservation measures. And you see that a lot more in the terrestrial, because people can actually be displaced from areas that are going to be put aside for conservation. But you do see a bit of it in the marine side, and that's what I was trying to highlight through that study.
Right. That makes sense. So what was like your biggest takeaway from your research?
So, I'm still in the thick of it. My PhD is looking at marine protected area effectiveness, but the role of ecosystem management within MPAs, and using that term ecosystem management in its widest sense possible. So including the human dimension. So not just looking at, habitats or, species, but finding out how do we include everybody in this ecosystem, make sure it functions to deliver for nature, while also providing the ecosystem services that people have come to depend on. So right now, I have 3 studies within my PhD. It's kind of like a 3-paper PhD, but we don't really do that at King's. So you have 3 publications and then you kind of have to link them together. So it's not, here's 3 publications, I'm stapling them together and then I'm done. Okay. Some universities do that. King's does not. So the last chapter that I'm currently working on is looking at effective monitoring of difficult to monitor habitats. And I'm using mudflats as a case study. So looking at how do we monitor, how do we protect what we can't monitor, basically? Because with mudflats in particular, there's the cost, but there's also the danger associated with mudflats, because obviously you can sink into them. So it is difficult to survey. So I'm looking at different proxy data. So looking at benthic species and looking at shorebirds and their populations, and how can they tell us, what can they tell us about the health of that system, of that habitat, and and you can also use remote sensing as well. It's a bit more difficult with mudflats because of tidal patterns and available data from satellites, because obviously they have to hit right at the exact the proper time, but using drones, anything that can really help us oversee these large expanses of habitats that need protection. So I'm looking at, from a management point of view, how do we make decisions to protect these areas, like if we don't know what state they're actually in. And unfortunately, mudflats in general in the EU, in Europe, are not in a great state. So that's one of the reasons I also selected them for my case study. And I'm looking at those in Scotland and up in Northern Ireland at two sites that are really good, rich areas for mudflats, large expansive mudflats. So that's what I'm looking at now, and I'm trying to tie all that together, looking at designation. So the designation management, looking at the equity, and then also looking at the monitoring of marine protected areas to get a sense of how effective they are, basically.
Okay. And when you're talking about mudflats, is this kind of like an intertidal zone between like the sea and the land? Okay.
Yeah. So they'd be in like estuary areas, and so it's fine sediment, muddy sediment, and so they're covered by the tides, obviously at high tide. So it is really intertidal. We're not looking at salt marshes, which would be a bit higher up.
Right.
So there's no, apart from some like biofilm, that's a type of algae. There's no vegetation really that grows there, except for maybe some invasive species and sometimes some seagrass beds. Right. But what really attracts the birds, the overwintering birds, is all the little critters that live within the mud. So your annelids, so your worms and your mollusks and all that, and they basically flock to these areas in the winter time to feed and roost and rest. So that's where they migrate to, and these are species that usually come up from the Arctic. So your Canada geese, for example, your Arctic skuas. So they come and overwinter in England, in the UK, and in Northern Europe. Some of them actually do go a bit further south, but that's where they spend their winter. So it's really important for them to have a rich supply of food, so that they can build their energy back up to fly back home, right. And so that can be used as an indicator of ecosystem health and habitat health, to make if the birds are in healthy numbers and we're seeing not the right, but a good evenness and diversity of benthic fauna.
Okay. You are covering like a huge swath of information with your papers. I'm like kind of blown away right now about the extent of your papers. It's a lot. So where are you? You just started 2 years ago.
3. I forget COVID. I forget what 2020 was. So I started my PhD in 2018.
Oh.
And
okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I started
like almost done.
Yeah.
Or you get kicked out.
Yeah. So you can interrupt. You can interrupt for internships or for life reasons.
Oh, okay. So you're like, I am intentionally taking a pause.
Yeah.
So it like, and that's okay. So your countdown stops.
Yes. So like for this summer, when I'm going back to the reserve and working on some side projects, I'm not working on my PhD for the next 3 months. And then that will add 3 months to my submission date. And some people do that because they found a really great job offer for a 1-year contract. So they'll stop their PhD for 1 year and then come back. Or if you go on maternity leave, or if you have a health issue, or the internship, for example, right. You can interrupt, but when you do interrupt, it means you're no longer a student, and there can be some implications for your visas and funding. So it's not it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
So
you can't just do it to do it. There's a little more complicated than that.
And my original submission date was this September, and then COVID happened, so we all got an automatic 3 months.
Okay.
And then I've have 6 months of interruptions. So I should be I have to hard deadline submit by this time next year.
Okay.
But I'm fortunate enough that because I already have 2 published chapters, it reduces my writing up dissertation wise, because it's just a question of weaving it all together. It's still going to be a lot of work, but I'm not starting from scratch. Some people have to write the entire manuscript. I've already have some of it,
Perfect.
Done. So
you're halfway up the mountain.
3/4 up. Right. I'm at base camp right now. I'm hanging out.
Perfect. So you're involved with several different organizations, which was really fun to pan through. But one that really highlighted, you just did a 30 by 30 report with the British Ecological Society. Could you chat a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the British Ecological Society, first of all, is as its name suggests, it's a professional membership, and I believe it's one of the oldest ecological societies in the world. And the UK government has kind of followed the global trend of putting up area-based conservation targets. So 30%. So 30 by 30 means 20 by 2030 having 30% protected areas, land and sea. So for the UK, and I believe the Convention on Biological Diversity is also echoing that. There's the IUCN. There's a lot of talk right now about this 30 by 30.
Yeah.
And
I think it's like, I think all the conservation organizations across the globe are trying to push for that. So, yeah.
And so what we wanted to find out was, what is the state of protected areas in the UK currently? And is this 30 by 30 what we need to be able to deliver for nature in the United Kingdom? And what we found, so there's, I can't remember how many, there's at least a dozen authors, early career scientists and researchers. And so we were looking at both terrestrial and marine protected areas. And the summary of it is that we need to be careful about what protection, what do we consider protection? So, when we talked about minimally protected, paper parks, and fully protection, because it's really easy to say, right, well, we've already hit our marine target. We're at, I think, 38% or something like that of marine area in protected areas in the UK. But does that mean they're really protected? Mm-hmm. And, it's looking at that terminology and ensuring that the government, if it's going to pledge, to meet this target, it needs to back that up with funding in place to adequately manage and monitor and enforce the protected areas that are in place. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, that's not the case for a lot of marine protected areas in the UK in general. Mm-hmm. So that's what we were working on, and that was released was Earth Day, so yeah, in April. Mm-hmm. I actually don't know what the government's response to it has been, or if there has been, but I do know it was picked up by quite a few news outlets here. I hope it makes people a bit more aware of the commitments that are needed to make sure that our biodiversity is protected.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. All right, at the end of each episode, I like to ask a series of questions. And for listeners, Constance has listened to all the episodes of the podcast, which just makes me so happy. So you're familiar with how this is going to go. And we're going to start off with, in my opinion, the hardest question. What's your favorite sea creature and why? And it could be for today, because mine truly changes every single day.
So for those who can actually see the video, there's a massive pinniped, so a seal sitting behind me. And I love pinnipeds. I love seals. That's just my favorite. So I think it's my favorite animal, full stop. They're just, to me, they're kind of like, was it dog mermaids?
Yes.
Or like cat mermaids.
Yes.
And I've been fortunate enough to be able to like dive with them and all that. So I just find them fascinating creatures. So yeah, I would have to say pinnipeds, but I do have a soft spot for shorebirds and seabirds because I work a lot with them as well. So So yeah.
Is there one that's more charismatic than the others for your shorebirds?
I I really like the gannets.
Yes.
I mean, everyone talks about puffins, and yes, they are adorable. Like
So
when you
cute.
see them in their wee burrows, they're so cute. And I think people overestimate how big they are. They're smaller than a pigeon. They're tiny. But the gannets are just, they're really cool looking, and they have this like insane dive where they just kind of like straight down when they fish, they just whew, and yeah, no, I just, it's like a torpedo. It goes straight down. It looks really cool. And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to like spend part of my summer around 20,000 like couples of them, which was really cool,
cool.
during the breeding season. So yeah, no, I think they're really interesting birds, and they like kiss each other like by rubbing their beaks. It's really cute.
That is cute. That is cute. So I've had one interaction with a gannet actually washed up on shore here, and it was like severely emaciated. So I called our local animal hospital, and they came out. And what I learned that day is that gannets, at least when they come here and are like tired and hungry, are very sassy. So like this bird was like not having our efforts. Like we had to like get it to bite a towel because it was trying to bite us. So we had to get it to bite the towel and then like wrap the towel around its head and its whole body and then carry it to the car I needed to go into to go to the hospital to get fat and fly away. But I was like, oh, you're a sassy big bird.
And I so working in that bird hospital, I've been nipped and bitten and all things.
Yeah.
Yeah, you I don't know how you say. Like, I remember one day I came back and I had a plaster on my arm, and they're like, "What happened?" I was like, "I got bit by a gull. Is it bit? Was I bit? I don't, because they don't have teeth. I don't know what you would call it, but it was definitely like I was bleeding."
I got attacked by a gull.
Yeah. I was just trying to help you.
He was trying to give you kisses. Just rubbing. I don't know. Do you have a fun seal story? You said you've dove with them. It's like I've kayaked with them. I've been next to them, but I've not actually been in the water with them. I think this is super cool.
So I've got a really good seal story, and I have a really good Laris gull story as well.
Okay.
So the seal story is pretty much traditional story. Like it was actually when I first started diving, and there is this one seal. Her name is Mustache, which means mustache, which means like mustache. Yeah. And she's been hanging about for years, and so she's used to people. And she just come out, and so I'm sitting on the seabed, and she grabs the lead diver's fins and then starts playing with it, and then realizes it's not food, and then she was no longer interested in us and just left. But it's weird because she's used to being around people, so I don't know if it was her trying to play, or if what was going on. It wasn't like she had never seen humans before, and she was very aware. Like actually, they're pretty much friends at this point. Mm-hmm. He's very used to her. So but it was really cool, just being able to be that up, just her there and just watching her and her watching us. And because I've seen them mostly obviously out on boats, and that was like the first time underwater, and it was just, I don't know what I was expecting. The size was pretty big, like, much bigger than I thought, but I should have been a bit more afraid, I think, in retrospect, because they do have pretty sharp teeth. But yeah, no, that was the first encounter, and yeah, I hope to get some more encounters this summer as well, when I go back to diving. And then as for the Laris gull, well, this we want to talk about sassy. So during my internship last year, part of what we do is we do a bit of awareness, and when tourists come onto the one island that they're allowed to of the marine protected area, we will answer questions about local what they're seeing. So the local birds that they can see, the seals, because they can see the seals from the island as well. And there was this juvenile, I want to say it was a Argentatus, the is that the European herring gull, the silver one?
Maybe.
Laris. Yeah. So yeah, the Laris Argentatus, which is so it was a juvenile, so it's brown, and its wing was a bit wonky. So we're looking at it, and we're just like, oh, poor thing. Like, what do we do? Do we we rescue it or do we leave it? Because sometimes you have to make that decision between, do we leave it or do we not? Because we're offshore at this point. So getting it back to the hospital is a handling. And so we spent the day kind of just watching him, and people were like, feeding him and all that. And because, we were like, oh, I don't think he's eaten in a while. And so we were just kind of not sure what to do with him. And the next day he was back there, his wings all weird. He's not flying anywhere. He's getting really close to people. And his wings just like drooping. And at the end of the day, we're like, right, you know what? We're going to leave him. And we'll see, next week, when we come back the next week, if he's still there. And at the end of the day, he was asking for food. And at the end of the day, he wasn't getting any food and just flew off. Like his wing magically got back together. So he spent 3 days tricking us into thinking he was injured to get food when there was absolutely nothing wrong with this animal. And this was a juvenile. So he wasn't that old, obviously. And if he had already learned to, I don't know if he had seen.
Where did he learn that?
I don't know. But we were stumped. And, we've spent days and, weeks around these animals. So, we were concerned for it. And no, I think he was just making, taking the mick. So taking the piss out of us.
Oh my God. That's clever. Clever bird.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, they're really smart. Once you spend time with these birds, you're like, yeah, especially I think any Aussie would tell you that they know they want food. They will come up with, some way of getting it, of tricking you into feeding them. So
that's awesome. Those are great seabird stories. There's a seabird story and seal story. Alrighty. What does the ocean mean to you?
So because I've grown up on the ocean, it's part of my life. And I honestly can't imagine not being around the ocean on a regular basis. But to me, it really means, I think it's like a lifeline for the planet. We can't survive. None of us can without our oceans, without having healthy oceans. Oceans feed, I think, something like 3 billion people on this planet. They're responsible for delivering the essential ecosystem services that we need. So, to me, I can't imagine life without our oceans. So I know it's very a bit poetic, not poetic, but a bit corny, but that's how I feel.
It's a poetic and corny question, but I love hearing people's answers. Alrighty, blank check. If you were given a blank check, unlimited funding for any project or projects up to 3, what would you use the monies for?
So I would really, I've talked about the limits of the funding and the lack of resources that we have for marine protected areas. And if I had a blank check, I would make sure that every marine protected area in the world was an actual marine protected area, and that it had a management plan and a management team and regular monitoring and enforcement, making sure that they're meeting their conservation objectives. So that would be, I don't even need to think twice about what I would use that money on. And if it's a blank check and I can do it on every single marine protected area around the world, I would do that.
That's a great one. It really is. It's so important. And that's it comes back to your park papers, right? If you can say it's protected, but if people don't know it's protected, so the education side, or if people don't care and there's no bite, there's no enforcement to make sure that it stays protected, it's just kind of, it's a park paper, like you said, or paper park. So paper park. So great use of the funds. I'm still working on finding this blank check, but I love asking the question. What is your favorite field story or stories to tell? And this could be a super fun, amazing day out in the water, great interactions with wildlife, or it could be just a day where things happened and it makes a really great story now.
So this isn't when I was thinking about this, actually my gull story was my favorite field story to tell, but I will tell another story that is funny and tragic at the same time. So I was doing surveying on the mud flats up in Strangford Lough one day, and there's a lot of there's a lot of pollution, like rubbish around, and as I'm like surveying, and I was looking at looking at discharge and all these other things, but like just noting how many plastic bottles there were as well, and all these things, just kind of getting a lay of the land. And I found a tenner in the mud, so like a £10 note, and now our new banknotes are made out of like they're polymer, so like they're plastic. Oh. And so that's why it was just sticking. I still have it, actually. I carry it around with me as like as a memory of it. Yeah. But it made me think about plastic pollution, because so this is a £10 banknote, right? It's got a monetary value to it. I could go and use it in a shop right now. But now they've switched from paper notes to polymer notes, so plastic notes. And those notes, obviously, because they're plastic, they don't disintegrate. So it's great when you put your jeans in the wash and you forgot that you had, £20 in your pocket, because it won't disintegrate. But it's not great when it ends up in the environment. So I was just, it got me to thinking about about how we're just using so much plastic and creating more plastic by making our banknotes out of plastic. So there's the good side of it, because you can't tear them. But yeah, and then they end up, like, I have no idea how it was in the mud. It was sticking out of the mud, and I pulled it out, and I have no idea how it ended up on this flat, like in the intertidal. But it clearly survived from somewhere. I don't think it fell out of anybody's pocket, because this is not an area like that people would be walking on. It's not a pleasant walk. It's a dangerous walk. So yeah, it made me really think about our plastic use. And I mean, I got £10 out of it.
Right. I was going to say, so somebody dropped it in the water, most likely, right? And it washed up into this mud flat, and nature was like, thank you for cleaning this area.
Yeah.
Here's a £10 note. But that's a really interesting point. I can still rip my dollars. So I don't think we've gone to polymers here in the States. But I don't know if they have something special in them anyway, because you can definitely wash them, and you can tell they've been washed, but they'll stay together. So maybe there's some sort of polymer in it. But that's a really good point. Like money didn't used to be like that, right? It was paper. Before that, it wasn't even paper. It was gold, right? It was metal. It was things from the earth that could go back to the earth. Interesting point. But I really like that nature gave you something and you carry it around like a totem.
And I think a lot of, I know, like in Canada, the banknotes are already out, like they were already plastic, and in Australia and New Zealand. So there's there's been
in the US then
So no. Like they're like in the US, like they're still paper. Like, the paper, like the polymer ones are really shiny, and you cannot tear them up. You cannot split it in half.
Okay, no, I can definitely.
And same with the euros. And I'm wondering if there's going to be a shift towards these kinds of banknotes. Because even in Papua New Guinea, they use, like, I went there and I was like, they already have polymer banknotes here too. So it's making its way around the world, and it's just we're talking about reducing our plastics use, but then we're printing plastic money now. So yeah.
That's something to think about, something I never really thought about, right? Like, we focus on what we consume, like the straws and all of that. But like when it comes to cash, interesting. All these things. Reduce the plastic use. All right. Well, on that note, kind of, at the end of each episode, I like to leave the audience with a conservation topic to go forth and bring into the world. What would you like the audience to take from your episode today?
So I'm not going to go over plastic, because I've heard so many people on this podcast talk about plastic, and it's great. Like, it really,
we just talked about it.
We literally just talked about it. But I guess I've got two conservation asks. The first one is, make sure that you eat sustainable seafood. Like, so just find out where you're eating it from. If you do eat fish, it's really important, because I've heard, was it Seabirds, and they were like, oh, everybody go vegan and all that. And I'm like, that is not possible for more than half of our planet's population. They just cannot. They can't afford to eat synthetic sushi. So Yeah.
And I also have concerns. I'm like, well, how is this actually manufactured? What is it in it? How is that sustaining our planet? Like, I have issues with this. So anyway, that's a whole nother topic.
So so sustainably sourcing, like using like the Good Fish Guide by the Marine Conservation Society. I don't know if that works outside the UK, but it can be a good indicator of, what's sustainably caught near you, and like what's in season, not in season, but like what is available right now, and where it's come from. I'm sure there's equivalents in the US and in other places. And also I think it's important to like eat local, because you're also helping, fishers livelihoods, and like a lot of my friends are fishers, and I will eat seafood that's literally been fished outside my front door. And that, there's nothing better than that, because there's no real carbon footprint to the transport there. So eat local and make sure it's sustainably sourced. I think that's, just making those choices. Or when you're in restaurants, making sure asking like where it's from, and that it's been labeled correctly if you do know, because sometimes they'll label something that isn't that, to sell it. So yeah, just be more conscious if you do decide to consume shellfish or seafood in general. And then my other ask is to write to your MPs. So I don't know what the equivalent, your representatives or whoever it is. Your representatives. And just tell them that you support, sustainable fishing, that you support marine protected areas. And, if you see that your government or your state or your city is allowing not so friendly practices, and that are having impacts on the marine environment, make your voices heard. That it's sending an email or letter or joining a group or something like that. We've have a lot of like small activist groups, but that do some great work up here, and responding to consultations if you do find them. That's also a good thing. It doesn't require a lot of time. You don't need to be a marine biologist, but just showing, your governments that you care. I think that'll go a long way.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And I think going back to your like seafood, just knowing the source, right? And even if I think asking the question, if the people who, if you're going to a seafood market, hey, like, do you know where this was caught, how it was caught? Because that's the important part, right? Yeah. And if they don't know the answer, I think just even simply just asking that question and showing that people care, they want to know, is super important. But then, like speaking and like making sure that your representatives in your community know how you feel about things, because that's how we get it done. If listeners want to find you, connect with you, learn more about you, where's the best place to do so?
So I have a website. It's Constance Schéré .com, ConstanceSchéré.com, or Twitter at Constance Schéré. That would be the main places that you would find me. You could Google me and only I come up because nobody has my name.
It's a great name, and it's super unique. It's awesome.
If somebody does have my name, they are not in my fields, right. So you can be sure it's me. But yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. If in French too, somebody's listening and they want to chat in French, I could do that. In Spanish. So. Awesome,
perfect. Well, Constance, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Me too. This has been great. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hey, one more thing. Do you want to dive more into the ocean and marine biology? Need a little guidance on ocean conservation? Head on over to marinebio.life/resources. We've got book recommendations, job posting pages, conference suggestions, and ocean-friendly products. All recommendations have been personally vetted by me, and I will continue to add to the collection as I come across cool things to share. Head on over to marinebio.life/resources to learn more. See you over there. Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to hear any insight you've gleaned. Leave a comment in the show notes or send me an email over at marinebio.life. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and, of course, share with your friends. If you want more resources for ocean news, including conservation topics and careers, plus personal insight from me that I just don't share anywhere else, join me at marinebio.life and sign up for email updates. Keep after your dreams and making waves in your community. one person can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.